These are the seasons that you win national championships. It's when you have a roster like the one that Georgia has. I think there's a particular trait. Well, there are certainly many particular traits that this team has that makes it a championship contender. But I think the age/experience of this Georgia team. You look across the board and you look at how old these guys are. Not that many younger players starting, or at least are going to play super significant snaps. When you hear as deep as a Georgia, you get young players to get in there, and you blow teams out. You get more players that are in there for big snaps. But with this Georgia team, I look at the experience and the age, and I think back to 2021. I think back to 2022. I think to Alabama's team in 2020. I think to a few other teams that we could talk about, like LSU 2019. NFL talent, coaching, depth, health, those things obviously, make a team a championship contender, help teams win championship. But that age and that experience on the collegiate level, in collegiate athletics, it matters a lot because the talent discrepancy among age is not that different, but the experience and the intelligence does. And I said that it's teams like this that compete for national championships. When you're in a period of time and a moment of time like we are with the Georgia Bulldogs and with Kirby Smart as the leader of this program, you get that every year. That's what you're getting every year. A team that can compete for a national championship, that at least has the opportunity to make a deep playoff run and make some noise. You're going to get that on a year in, year out basis with Kirby Smart, but there are years where it's just a little bit more obvious than the others. It's like the 2021 team. It took people a few weeks to figure out, hey, like this is a real contender to win the national championship. And then 2022, Georgia's the overwhelming favorite to win, right? And then you get last year, not as much, right? The three-peat was talked about. We've obviously talked about that a lot with Georgia. But what you got was a team where it's like, hey, we think that this team can win a national championship, right? Like Carson Beck, we're pretty sure that Carson Beck is good enough to lead Georgia to a ring, and that this defense is going to be able to hold out even though they've lost it. I think that there's a different vibe with this team, and part of that is the experience. And like I've said over and over, it starts with Carson Beck. If you don't have a good quarterback, it's just not going to work in football. It usually is not going to work. I have a conversation with my friends a lot, with Dean and Matt, just people, and we talk about the NFL. Like I said, it starts with Carson Beck. It starts with that quarterback position. You go through all of the past champions. You can go back to 2010 if you want. I'm trying to bring up relevant history, but national championship winning quarterbacks, they were really, really good. Last year, J.J. McCarthy, he's on the lower end of that spectrum. You talk about in the last 15 years, J.J. McCarthy and Jake Coker are the worst quarterbacks for national championship winning teams. That Michigan team was stacked, and J.J. McCarthy ends up being a top 15 pick. Whether I agree with it or not, there's NFL scouts that think that he's going to be a starting caliber player, maybe even in year one in the NFL. But Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, Tua Tagovailoa, these are the quarterbacks that win national championships. So it's starting with a Carson Beck, who is entering year 5 of college football, has been around, has thrown passes in a national championship game, has now started and won a New Year's Six bowl game. You get that experience with him, and in that leap forward, it starts there. And you look across the board at the teams that are ranked high in this year. Will Howard been around for a few years, Ohio State, stacked roster. Dylan Gabriel been around for a few years now at Oregon. Jalen Milroe, this is year 3, year 4? Quinn Ewers, year 3, right? These teams with really highly ranked quarterbacks have guys, or teams that are highly ranked have guys that have real experience. And then you go to, who's protecting Carson Beck? Ernest Green is the youngest guy in that offensive line, in that starting line group. This is going to be year 3 for him. You get a few year 3 starters in Georgia's roster, and Ernest Green at left tackle is one of them. But Then you move across the board, the guards. Tate Ratledge is going to be your 5. Dylan Fairchild, year 4. Micah Morris, year 4. Xavier Truss, year 6 at tackle. Jared Wilson, this is year 4. Even though he hasn't been starting, he's a guy that's been around for a long time. So Georgia has experience on the offensive line and a group that has won awards or has competed for awards, a group that I think can win that Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line in college football. Then you go to the weapons. Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers, they're gone. Well, what do you have? Dominic Lovett, year 4 for him in college football. Ra Thomas, same thing, and their transfers who have been around for a while and have seen a lot of SEC defenses. Who are going to be the other good weapons for Georgia? Well, Dylan Bell Jr., Oscar Delp Jr., Benjamin Urasek. What is this, year 4, year 5 for Benjamin Urasek? So you get a couple juniors, Ernest Green, Oscar Delp, Dylan Bell, that are probably going to be starters and play a lot. And those are the youngest. It's year 3, not year 1 or 2. So this offense is not going to feature a lot of youth, right? The youth is behind it. It's even in the second group, guys like Colby Young has been around for a few years. Arian Smith been around for a few years. It's the depth where you find some of that youth. But even if it is Branson Robinson, it would be year 3 for him, year 2 of really playing college football. And then you slide over to the defensive side of the football. Well, the linebacker room is young, but it's led by a senior in Smael Mondon. You've got a junior in Jalen Walker. Outside linebackers, you're led by one of the oldest guys in Chaz Chambliss, who's a senior. So even though that there's a lot of youth like Raylan Wilson and C.J. Allen and Justin Williams, Chris Cole, you look around, there's also a lot of age and experience and champions, right? Jalen Walker, contributor on national championship teams. Smael Mondon, contributor on national championship teams. Chaz Chambliss, same thing. So even in the groups that are younger, like the linebacker room, you got older guys like Smael. The defensive line. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, this is year 4. He's been around. He just hasn't played a ton. This is your Stackhouse, year 5. Warren Brinson, year 5. Mike Hill-Williams, year 3. It's going to make up kind of your defensive line. Christian Miller, it'll be year 3 for him. Another guy with depth who's coming in as a junior. Secondary room is where there's a little less experience, but you definitely have age. Malachi Starks, I think you're going to get 3 juniors probably, and Malachi Starks, Julian Humphrey, and Dalen Everett. Obviously, Malachi Starks, this will be year 3 of him starting, so there is some serious experience with him back there. If it ends up being Dan Jackson that starts or Ja'Cory Thomas, right? Been around for a couple of years. Ja'Cory Thomas hasn't played a lot. So the secondary room, which I made a whole video about the secondary a couple of days ago, and I talked about, are they going to answer the questions that ESPN, that Greg McElroy, that Kirby Smart have for the secondary, which is this going to be Georgia's weakest group? Well, it's Georgia's least experienced group, and the theme of this video is experience and why I think that they have a championship trait in that the 21 team, the 22 team had. Obviously, Michigan had a lot of experience when they won the national championship. You look at Alabama, right? Devontae Smith, their best player, Mac Jones, Najee Harris, all those guys were at least year 3, the really high-level players for them. You get that with this Georgia roster, right? The youngest key contributors for Georgia this season would be freshmen, right? And I'll set them aside for a second. That's sophomore class. Guys that I think that will contribute from the sophomore class for Georgia. I think Roger Robinson can be obviously a rotational running back for Georgia, and as a sophomore, I think that you may see a defensive lineman or two. Well, C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson, sophomores, those linebackers. You may see a defensive lineman or two. I think that Gabe Harris is a name to keep an eye on that outside linebacker room, number 29. In the defensive back room, not as much from the sophomore class. Maybe just Joel Aguero, right? A guy who I actually think has a good chance to start. So 1, 2, maybe sophomore starters for Georgia on defense, none on offense. Maybe Roger Robinson starts a game if Trevor Etienne misses time. The freshman class, how many freshmen are going to contribute for Georgia? Well, how many contributed when Georgia won national championships in 21-2? A few. Brock Bowers, right? Keely Ringo was a redshirt freshman. Ladd McConkey was a redshirt freshman in 21. On defense, it was a very old defense, comparatively speaking. On offense, obviously the weapons. A.D. Mitchell was a true freshman. That's how it shook out for Georgia. On offense, you're not going to have that this time around. And then in 2022, you get a true freshman in Malachi Starks, but there's not a lot of true freshmen that are contributing for Georgia. at those spots, because the wide receivers, you had Karis Jackson, who was an older guy. You had Marcus Osby-Jackson, who had been around. Well, I think you get a couple freshmen that maybe rotate on defense. There's a lot of excitement around KJ Bolden at the safety position, Ellis Robinson at the cornerback position, really highly rated 5-star recruits as defensive backs. We talk about how Georgia's defensive back room is inexperienced. Well, if those are more talented guys, they're going to fight their way on the field. DeMello Jones is another guy to keep an eye on for that, and any of them can be a factor in the returning game. I think another freshman who may rotate, and because you've seen this, Kirby Smart does trust freshmen if they are ready to play. Trayvon Walker, Nolan Smith, for example. I think Joseph Jonah Ajonye, number 99, the defensive end for Georgia, true freshman, is a guy that could make an impact for them as well. Another one to keep an eye on. But even the transfers that they went after and they got, Charvitian Jr., Xavier McLeod, this is going to be year 2 for him, I believe. Kobe Young, year 4, year 5. They went out and they got experience. London Humphreys was one of the younger ones. This will be sophomore year for him. But Georgia does stick to that theme of having an older team. And you look at that, I think that in college basketball that really helps. Like UConn has a blend of old and young. I think that Georgia's going to have a really, really healthy blend of old and young this season. I know Kirby Smart loves it. I know he loves having the older lineups. It starts with the quarterback, Carson Beck. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post. I don't think I introduced myself this time. Make sure you're checking out the link. And if you stuck with me, you get to see what I'm looking at. I'm at the beach. That's why my backdrop looks weird. Maybe just one more video from here, from the beach. Thanks for watching.